Hello and welcome to lesson 1 of week 30. In this lesson, we're going to look at how to retrieve the data from the database, and we're going to update the records that we retrieve. In the last lesson, we saw how to insert records in multiple database tables when we create a client profile, and we do this by logging in, and we created a user called testadmin. And when I log in with this, we have two forms on the page, one for us to register a new client and the other to retrieve a client. We created a client with the client ID, clients 1, 2, 3, and when we click retrieve client, we have an error here, and we're going to look at what this error is about. So I'm going to come in here to look at what the error is all about. So our error is on this page, and it's because I'm trying to retrieve a profile that I have not created yet. So I'm going to just delete that from here for now so that we can get the form. So I'll explain all of this, and we're going to see exactly what is supposed to be here. Let me delete this. These are the things that are problematic lines of code. We said that we use the value attribute to specify the value from the database, and we get that value by passing the variable that holds the row that is fetched from the select query from the app file. We looked at that in the last lesson. When we retrieve a client, we select from the client profile table, and then we fetch that, store in the client profile, and we send this client profile to the profile page here. So we have that for the first tab, which is client profile. So the second tab was trying to fetch record from a different table that I have not sent here, and that is why we have this error here. But without that, we'll get the page for the clients displayed. Now, the record we entered had all of the fields for the client. What we want to do is to be able to update this field. Now we have a chlamydia and gonorrhea placeholder for a form, for the hepatitis B reporting form, and for the congenital syphilis, where we already have the form, but the only value we have here is the unique ID, because the unique ID is already here for the client. So what we want to do, the mission is to be able to populate all of the form fields with the records from the database for easy update. So we update only the field that we need to update, and then the field we don't need to update, we just leave them the way they are. So that is what we want to achieve in this lesson. So I'll use the personal profile, and the procedure we're going to use here is going to be exactly the same for any of the forms. So let's say we want to change the email address, we want to change maybe the country, we want to change the sex, the date of birth, things like this. The first thing we want to do is to take note of what the names of the form fields are. Now this, we have specified that we want this to be handled by a route called update profile, which means that in our app file we want to create an update profile route. Before we create that, we want to take note of the names of each field. We want to make sure these names are unique on this form. So we have the unique ID, named unique ID, the first name field, because we are going to retrieve all of the values that are held here. The value that is passed here in the value attribute is, we use clients, which was the clients that was passed here when we retrieved that when we retrieve the client and we pass it to the profile page. So we use clients dot the column name. I refer to your last week's lesson to recall how we did this. And so we have all of the values here to populate them or to leave them on the field. So in HTML, when you use the value attribute, you are specifying a value for the field. If you use placeholder, it is not a value, but it just gives a hint as to what is to be in that field. So when you use value, it means that if you don't fill anything in, this value will be sent to the database. And this value here is extracted from the database. Because we are using Ginger template, we use the expression double curly brace, and then we use the variable that holds that row, clients dot the column name, and that's how we get this. So now we have taken note of this. We want to go to the app file, and what we want to do here is to create the route, and the name of the route that we specified here to process this form is an update profile route, and that is what we are going to create here to be able to update the profile. So let's start. App.update client, or let's say update profile, and the method is post. Now there are many ways to do this. There are sometimes you can pass the ID as a query and or as a parameter for this argument, but I'm not going to use that method because it's pretty common and you can easily learn that. I'm going to be doing it this way, where we create a function that updates the profile, and then what we want it to do is to get all of the values in the form field. If it's changed, if it's the same, it gets the values as it is, and then send it to the database in an update query and change the value in the database row. We want to have a variable that holds a message. So where we have success, failure, this is where it will be. Let's look at what the client ID is. We want to say client ID is equal to the value held for the unique ID is unique ID. So the form field unique ID is named unique ID here. So make sure that you're using the name for the field. So I put unique ID. So if you don't want to get confused, you can make this unique ID so the names will be the same. I want to also check if logged in. So let's say if logged in session. So if the user is logged in, and if the client ID is filled in, we want to check the database if that client exists in the client profile first. So in the event where the client ID is updatable, in the event where this is updatable, you want to check if the person changes this, is it present in the database? If not, we don't want to update a column where with the client ID, we want this not to be updatable in this scenario. But there are other validation processes you can take by leaving this not to even be displayed here in a field to be updatable. So I made it read only, and so no matter how we click this, we can change the value. So I'm checking now if logged in is in session, and if the client ID is filled in, I want to check the table if that unique ID exists. And if it exists, I want to get it and save it in the client profile like this. And then I will say if client profile, so if I fetch a row, if I return a row from that query, I'm going to change this. If I return a row from here, I want to now get all of the values from the table. And so the first thing I'll do is to want to set a value for updated by. So we can use the timestamp of now, updated at is equal to datetime now. I want to do updated by the current logged in user, and then I want to do the first name from the form. So we want to get all the value from the form field. First name is name, first name. Last name is name, last name. Middle name is name, middle name. Date of birth is name DOB. If you are not sure, you always go back to your form to check what you named them. We have country of birth, I think, after middle name, last name, date of birth. We have country of birth and his name, country of birth. We have gender and his name, gender. We have marital status. We have occupation. We have the gender identity. We have sexual orientation. We have the phone number. We have the address. We have the city. We have the state, the zip code, the country, the email address. We have the ethnicity. The ethnicity is request.form, and then we have race, and then we have, I think that should be the last on the form, the race. Let's see. Yeah, we have race. Race is the last. So we've retrieved all of the form values. The next thing we want to do now is to run an update query. So let's use our context manager. So I'll say with engine.connect as con. I want to say result is equal to con.execute, and I want to run an update query which says update client profile set updated at equal to updated at. Now go back to part 1 to recall how we run update query in MySQL. So you update client profile set updated at equal to, we pass in the variable, updated by, we pass in the variable, first name we pass in. Because I want to break this so we can see it, I'm going to use a backslash and enter, and I'm going to have that for last name, backslash and enter. We have middle name, same thing. Let's see, country of birth, gender, marital status. We'll do country of birth. So these names, first name, these are the names of the column in the database, and these in the curly brace are the variables here that we're passing as the value. So this is equal to country of birth. We have gender, marital status, occupation. So we have gender equal to gender. We have marital status and occupation. Then we have gender identity, sexual orientation, and telephone number. Sexual orientation, telephone number. We have address, city. We have state, zip code, country, and then we have email, ethnicity, race. So now we've listed all of the columns, and now we want to say, so when we list the last one, we don't put a comma, we'll say where unique ID is equal to client ID. So what we're updating is the row. We're updating a particular row where the unique ID is equal to the unique ID of the clients that we have retrieved. And what we want to do next is to commit this. So let's look through it again. We create an update profile route, which is the action for the form here to be able to update. For this route, we want to check if the unique ID is filled in. If a user is logged in, we want to check if the unique ID exists in the database table, and then want to retrieve all of the information in that row. Once it's retrieved, we want to run an update query, and the syntax is update table name set all of the column names and their values where a particular condition is true. So where the unique ID now is equal to the client ID. So we're only going to update the row where the unique ID matches. So that is what we have done here. And then we commit this. So once it's committed, we want to maybe put a message and say the client profile updated successfully. And we want to return let's say we want to go to the home page and we want it to now put a message on the home page that says that the client has been updated successfully. So this is the syntax. Let's go to the form to see if all is well. So let's try to say we want to change this person's name from Jane to Martha. We want to change the last name to Louise, like this. And then let's say we want to change from single to married. Then we want to change, let's say, the country here to, I think we had the country, let's say we want to change the country of address to like Algeria. And then I'm going to update the profile. If all is well, we should have gotten the success message here. Well, we didn't get that, but let's see whether this updated. Client 1, 2, 3, retrieve client. So it's updated. We have Martha, we have the last name updated, we have changed to married, and then we have the country here is not staying in the field. So this is where we'll see what the form holds. For country, we have address, we have the placeholder, but we don't have the value here. So if we want to see the value in the field, we have to come here and make sure we do that here. So instead of placeholder, we change this to value equal to, we use the expression, and we have client dot it here, so we have client dot state, and this is going to be value, not placeholder. Change this to value, client dot zip code, and then here we have value equal to client dot country. So I'll save this, come back here, refresh, and see if we have the value staying. So it's saying client.country, which means that we didn't put the expression sign here, and so when I refresh again this time, I should have it either blank or the country list here. So we have the Algeria there. So this is how you do your updates and you debug your code should you have any error. So we're done with updating this. We redirected to the home page and then we passed the message to the home page. But I think we should render template instead of redirect URL for. Let's do render template here so we can see the next time. Render template, and then we'll not use URL for. We say home.html and we'll put the message. So let's go back there and try to change something again. Let's say here I'm changing the zip code 1111111. I want to put city, let's say dual city, something like this, and then I update. Now we have client profile updated successfully sent to the form. So we've successfully done this. So if I retrieve the client, we have that sent to the form. So we have all of the information retained like we want. So this is perfect. We've seen how to update record. We can also delete record, but the scope of this course we are not deleting. If you want to delete, you do exactly the same thing, but your query is going to be delete where a condition is true. That's what you're going to use. So you refer to part 1 to see what the delete query looks like. Now we have this profile.html file and we have 4 tabs here, if we recall from last week's lesson. The personal information tab 1 is what we just handled. The second tab, chlamydia and gonorrhea, hepatitis B reporting, and congenital syphilis. Now, if we recall from our previous lesson, let's look at our model. We have models for the users for the client profile. And then for our form, like chlamydia and gonorrhea, we have client screening STI, we have client treatment STI, we have partner management STI for chlamydia and gonorrhea. We have congenital syphilis mother, congenital syphilis infant for the congenital syphilis form. We have hepatitis B mother for the hepatitis B form. So we know that some of the forms have 2 tables where they send the data to, and this is one thing we need to bear in mind when we want to now work on the other forms. Now, I do not have a form created for the chlamydia and gonorrhea and for the hepatitis B, but I have a form for congenital syphilis. We have on our template a congenital syphilis, hepatitis B, hepatitis form, and STI placeholder. But we don't need any of all of this because we are going to do it a different way. Because we are not going to be calling these templates, but are going to be forms within this profile that hold information from the database. We created our client profile and we inserted records into all of the table. Now, if we go into, let's say, client screening STI, for instance, we can see that when we created the profile, we always had the created at, updated at, created by, updated by, and the unique ID field populated, and the rest of the field left blank. And we did this because we want every client to have one file on account creation, and we want to retrieve this file for updates. So at the very least, they always have their unique ID on a particular row, and we always want to retrieve that row for updates, but not insert new row for a client. So when an account is created, the structure we have built is all the forms are generated for the client. And how do we generate the form? By inserting records into those tables. And so when you go to the route that create client profile, let's go to our app file and let's recall what we did here. When we created the register client, we inserted minimum records into all of the tables, and the minimum record are just the timestamps of creation and the unique ID, so that we'll have a row for information for the clients for the different types of form that we have for this practice. When we retrieve clients, we only retrieve the client's profile, but now we want to retrieve all of the information across all the tables for the client so that it will be populated across. Now, I've done this previously and I commented it out, and just to save time, I'm going to uncomment it and then we're going to walk through it. Now, instead of retrieving just the client profile, we want to retrieve from every table, and so we just repeat the same query, save them in different variables. So now this is result profile, and we select all from client profile where the unique ID is the client ID. The client ID is the unique ID that we entered the form. Then we do the same thing for the other tables: hepatitis B mother, client screening STI, client treatment STI, congenital syphilis mother, congenital syphilis infant, and partner management STI. When we do that, we now decide to call the result and we fetch the row for each of all of this that we have in the query. Once this is done, we want to check if client profile, and let's check if client profile, if client hepatitis, if client screening STI. So if all of them have results in them and are retrieved, we want to now return render template profile.html. But we're not going to render just the client equal to client profile. We're going to send all of the data here. So we're going to be sending client equal to client profile. We're going to be sending everything: hepatitis equal to client hepatitis, STI screening equal to client screening STI, treatment STI equal to client treatment STI, congenital syphilis mothers equal to client congenital syphilis mother. And so that's what I have done here by passing in all of these variables that holds the row to the profile page. So at this point now, we can now retrieve them on the profile page. We've seen how we retrieve the client profile, and we used that already here, where we said on the first form the value is clients.this, because the name here is client. Now the name for hepatitis is hepatitis. The name for STI is client screening STI, and for treatment STI is client treatment STI. These are for the chlamydia and gonorrhea forms. For the congenital syphilis, we have congenital syphilis mothers and congenital syphilis infants. These are the names we passed, and so we're going to use them here on the congenital syphilis form that I already created but have no value in them. So we have this congenital syphilis form here, and we know that there are two tables that hold the information for the congenital syphilis. We want the form action to be, you can either use URL for, or you just use a route. Let's say update syphilis, something like that. Anything you want as your route. So you can make it update syphilis, and then we'll create a route in the app file called update syphilis. Now for the date of report here, we want the value to be report date. So if we go to the congenital syphilis table, let's say we want to get congenital syphilis mothers, and I run this. So if we come to congenital syphilis mothers, we know that we have a column called date of report written like this. So we'll come here and we'll say the name of the variable that we passed to this form is called congenital syphilis mothers, like this. So I'm going to copy that. I'll say we'll pass this variable that holds all of the information for the row, and I'll copy that, and I'll come back to this client profile here, and I'll change the value here now using my Ginger expression, congenital syphilis mothers dot date of report. Now I can change this now. Instead of clients, congenital syphilis mothers dot unique ID. So let's refresh our page and see if our unique ID is populated on the page. So I'll refresh here. All is well. We should go to the congenital syphilis, and we still have the unique ID, so which means we are retrieving the information. So we have that of date of report, that of mother's unique ID. Let's do just for 3 fields and test, and then it's the same pattern you're going to use to do everything. So for the value here, you change the value here to congenital syphilis mothers dot, and let's see what the name of the form field is. The name of the form is test at first visit. So put it like the test at first visit. So you get the point. So you're going to make the values for all of the form fields equal to what is from the database, and then you are going to create the other forms, the other 2 forms that we have here, chlamydia and gonorrhea, the same way, and we're going to create them within the nav. So we have this first profile within this nav. That's the first tab. We have the client's profile information. The second tab starts from the next one here. The second tab starts from here, the next nav. And so within this place, you create your form here. And then the last one comes here. So you create the form field according to the columns of the database table. Now in this case of the congenital syphilis, by the time you get to a part where we're asking for instance, here we want to get like infant unique ID. The infant unique ID is not held in the congenital syphilis mothers table. Let's look at it. Infant unique ID is not held here. It is held in the congenital syphilis infant table. And so we have the infant unique ID meeting infant unique ID like this. And when we passed the value here, we had congenital syphilis infant here. So we're going to take this, copy it, come back here. So at this point, we're going to be using congenital syphilis infant unique ID. And so when we refresh our form, we come here, we're going to have the infant unique ID on the page because we're retrieving that information. So this is how we retrieve information from two tables on one form. And then when it is time to update, you come to your app file. On that same route, you are updating both tables, updating the congenital syphilis mothers and infants based on which of the table holds the column that you are updating. So if you are updating the infant unique ID at this point, so you are having two update queries, one that is updating the syphilis infant and the other that is updating the syphilis mother. I'm not going to go into the depth of that, but this is how we generally do this, and I'm going to leave you to explore and go further or deeper in how to do this. There are a lot of things that we've not done here, as this is not production level development. We do not do a lot of validation. There are a lot of things like looking at the inputs, trying to sanitize the inputs to prevent different types of attack. That is outside the scope of this course. This is as far as this course goes. The next course to this is Advanced Python and Production Development, where we handle everything for production, from validation to our CI/CD pipeline to creating environment files for production and to securely save our data in our database. So if you want to go further and deeper in understanding how to build applications for production, you should take the Advanced Python and Production Development course, which follows immediately after this course. So this is where we end this course. Thank you for sticking with us for 30 weeks, and we hope you enjoyed this course. We hope you enjoyed the lesson so far, and we hope you gained something from the course. We encourage you to go on Facebook, YouTube, like our page, like our lessons. If there's any lesson that speaks to you, record your projects, post on YouTube, tag us. Anything if you enjoyed or you think you benefited from this course. So thank you, and see you in course 3 for those of you who will transition to the next course.